And joining us on this broadcast is international security expert Dr. John Blaxland from Washington, D.C. Doctor, it's good to see you and thank you very much for your time. There is support from the Republicans on their president in this war, but America or Americans are divided about the goal of this war. What do you say?
Yeah, there's so many different perspectives on this war that it's actually hard to get your head around. I think it's useful to step back and think of this in a number of categories, politically, legally, technologically, logistically, geographically, historically. And I like to start with history because I think, people are saying this is an illegal war and it's been started, 10 to 11 days ago. I'm wondering whether or not we're using the wrong paradigm to think about this. I think the 100 Years' War of a few hundred years ago in Europe is perhaps a more suitable kind of parallel to draw. This is a conflict that goes back to 1979, if not the bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon in 1983, and the various waves of conflict between the United States and Iran, as well as Israel and Iran, going back, almost half a century.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a significant manifestation of that conflict, I would say. This is not something that just came out of the blue. It's not ab initio. This is a continuation of a long-standing conflict. Mm-hmm. I'd also add that, the famous Greek historian Thucydides talked about the causes of war being about fear, honour and interests. And in my mind, those three words really speak volumes about what's at stake here. The sense of fear across the Gulf region, the sense of honour in the United States, in Israel and in Iran, let alone across the Gulf, and the interests, the competing interests here at play, existential interests for Israel and for Iran, and now evidently for the Gulf states as well. Mm-hmm. So this is really, interestingly, a very complicated situation. And as your previous speakers pointed out, there's a real issue in terms of what the United States is doing. The United States has three arms of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And the executive, the president, obviously, operating in a way that is surprising. Previous presidents have sought to garner a coalition and sought to outline their case before international forums like the United Nations, mm-hmm. to garner support and to enlist that and get the logistics support and pre-positioning of forces, such that you actually have enough to not just win by a margin, but win convincingly. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to have been the case this time. The United States has been prepared to act virtually unilaterally, albeit with the Israelis alongside, but they haven't sought to get the traditional alliance structure out of NATO or other countries like Australia until after the fact. So that's been quite surprising, and it's particularly surprising given what appears to be a focus on Iran as a facilitator of unrest in the wider Middle East, particularly with Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and of course Hamas in Palestine, mm-hmm. And in the Israel-Palestine space. So it's really interesting to think about how this is going to unfold, given that Iran has been backed by China to a certain extent. It's being supported by Russia as well. And of course, there are so many spillover effects in terms of China's footprint in the Middle East, Russia's ability to now gain more revenue from the oil spigot being released and the price going up. And there's more to, there's more to say on a range of fronts, particularly geographically, technologically and logistically. And of course, how does this all...
Doctor, sorry to cut you short, but let's just go back to the statements being made by the president and also the confusion that is really playing out in the Congress, because some of these U.S. officials, including the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and the State Secretary, Marco Rubio, have been giving conflicting reports to the Congress. And I will actually read some of the statements coming from the Congress and some of the senators, what they're saying. Warren says, this is not a war that makes us safer. There's another senator who says, this is Mark Kelly, he says, clearly they do not have a strategic goal, they didn't have a plan, they have no timeline. Because of that, they have no exit strategy. What can Congress do at this moment? What can they really do? If this is a real big problem, what can they do to avert the problem?
So it's been pretty evident that with the Republicans being prepared to support the president, the Congress virtually can do no more than it has already. But I'm just not sure it's fair to categorise this as completely without any strategy. I think there's lots of points of criticism here, and I understand the views that have been shared, and I'm not completely averse to them. But I think it is useful to think about the fact that President Trump has really, throughout both terms in office, seen Iran as an enemy and has, his objection to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in his first term, his hostility towards Iran back then, perhaps constrained by the so-called adults in the room that were operating around him, that prevented him from taking more precipitous action back then. My sense is that circumstances over the last 12 months, with over the last 2 years, really, with the actions that Israel has taken against the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas, that really changed the equation, and it made the attack last year against Iran more feasible, and then this year a repeat attempt when what happened last year wasn't completely successful in President Trump's eyes, let alone the Israelis' eyes. So okay. I think we need to be careful not to be sucked in too much into one side or the other's politicized interpretation of what is yet to completely unfold, because really, to be honest, this could prove completely catastrophic. Or we might see in the next couple of days that this is actually, it might the gamble that paid off. It doesn't look like that from here right now, but warfare has a way of surprising us. Plans get unraveled day by day. There are iterations of things that can change things. And here we're seeing, particularly on the technology front, the use of drones, it's a game changer. We've been watching the use of drones in Ukraine for the last few years and been thinking, well, we probably one of these days we must catch up. And all of a sudden, across the Gulf, across the United States, NATO and other allies, all realizing that this is now a way bigger issue than we've thought of before. And of course, we're now butting up against logistic limits. The exquisite but super expensive, precise missile systems that have cost millions of dollars, that are hard to replace, that are very good at what they do. But when you run out of them, you face a real problem. And okay. There's a saying, quality has a quantity all of its own. And I think we're running up against that now. And in terms of the outcome for the war, this is something, while President Trump might want to say he's going to have the final say, the other side gets to have a vote too.
Dr. John Blaxland, we'll have to leave this discussion there. Thank you very much for your time and for talking to us today.
Good to talk to you, Amin.